bouncing it. The bounce sits up. The Dragons are steamrolling to week 2 of the finals.
Inside the last 10 seconds of the game, St George, Illawarra to the death, trying. Brown goes to the air. Going back is Mabon, leaping high and taking it in marvellous fashion with Rod Wishart. He has scored an incredible try and ties this ball game up. Bartram from 18 metres out, he strikes it nicely. St George Illawarra win for the first time in their premiership line. Here's Nathan Blacklock down the sideline, chipping over the top of Joel Kane. Got a room service bounce to win the game for the Dragons and book himself a New South Wales Blues Origin jump.
Episode 188 of the Red V podcast is on the airways, folks. Welcome to your comprehensive wrap of everything St George Illawarra with me, Jack Clifton, and my co-host, Curtis Woodward. Another big episode of the podcast. Tonight we'll talk about yet another Dragons defeat. We feel like we're going around in circles. Another decent performance from the Red V where they competed for 50 or 60 minutes, but a bit too much class from Melbourne down there in Wollongong. In the last home game at the Gong for the year, Melbourne getting the Chocolates 38 points to 28. We'll look forward to the match this weekend. The Dragons travel over the ditch to take on the New Zealand Warriors in Auckland. We'll also be talking about Ryan Carr and his tenure as head coach of the Dragons. Will he be kept around potentially to be an assistant coach next year? Or the rumours true, will he be moving under Benji Marshall to the West Tigers? We'll also have your latest Dragons news and updates. We'll take a deep dive into the history books and have a look at this week in Dragons history. Also a few birthdays of some pretty decent players that pulled on the Red V and the Scarlet and White of the Steelers. And we'll, of course, also answer your fans' corner questions a little bit later on in the podcast. Well, I'm very pleased to welcome Curtis Woodward back to the podcast. Kurt, we obviously sent a heartfelt message out to you and Tep last week, and I know you don't want to go into it too much, mate, but really great to have you back on the podcast because I certainly missed you, and I'm sure the fans missed your dulcet tones last week. How are you doing on this warm Tuesday night, isn't it? It's a bit, I don't know if it's warm out in the Golden West or Golden Southwest of Campbelltown, mate, but pretty warm in the Sutherland Shire tonight.
Mate, thank you very much. Great to be back and talking some football, bit of normality. Thanks to the Dragons fans on social media that actually took the time to, well wishes and stuff like that. So thank you. But anyway, let's talk football. Yeah, no, before that anyway, mate, it's felt like spring out here for about 3 months. It's incredible weather. I'm a little bit worried about summertime and fires and all that stuff, but let's not get stuck in all that serious things. Look, I'm just happy to be back on the podcast and by all reports, thank you to the great Johnny Pett for coming back last week out of retirement and doing a fantastic job. Just very appreciative that I get another chance on this great podcast with all you lovely Dragons folk.
Well, plenty to get through tonight, Kurt, so let's not waste any more time. Let's jump into your Dragons news and updates for this week. We'll lead off with the team list review for the Dragons. Not an awful lot to report here. It's the same 17 that trotted out, or that was named last Tuesday, I should say. Different to the side that trotted out on Saturday night against the Storm. I guess the big changes are we see Zach Lomax again named. Whether he takes the field, there could be a question mark there. With only 2 games to go in the season, wouldn't be surprised to see if Zach doesn't play in that match over there in New Zealand against the Warriors and maybe either rest it up for the rest of the season or rest it up for that final game of the season at Cogra. Elsewhere, it's the same side that lined up last week, apart from Little back in the starting hooker role and Connor Mulhisen on the bench, along with Ryan Couchman, Ben Murdoch-Masila and Zane Musgrove. Jaden Sullivan has been named on the extended bench. I dare say that we won't be seeing Jaden obviously signed for the West Tigers for next year, but hamstring concerns that apparently he is over. I don't know what the go is in regards to the Dragons naming him there. Maybe there are some chances of him potentially coming in a late decision, but I wouldn't think so with only 2 games left in the season. And Jack Bird in the Dragons, the casualty ward on the Dragons website, he's ruled out for the season as well, and still no Jack DeBellin until at least next week for the Red V. So not an awful lot to talk about, Kurt. Pretty much the same side that came out last week, and yeah, this is going to be the squad that's going to have to try and get the business done in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, Jack, I wanted to save this for the podcast, but someone, a contact of mine that knows a little bit about the Dragons and might know a little bit more than myself, is telling me that Zach Lomax, for all intents and purposes, will take the trip to Auckland. That could change in the next couple of days when they downsize their squad, but apparently they are intending him to play, and he wants to get over into Auckland, which would be a huge bonus for the Dragons, particularly. And I've got a few comments about, and I know we said we don't want to talk about defensive issues on the outside fringes for the Dragons, but he makes such a difference to that Dragons outfit defensively, particularly against a really good Warriors side. But look, could be wrong, but I'm happy to report so far, or from at this point in time, that they are intending, or Lomax is keen to get over there and play against the Warriors this weekend. So we'll see it. We'll see how that flies. But, things change. But for the time being, I'm reporting that Lomax will be in the side.
The Dragons NRLW side is heading back to Kogarah, or playing at Kogarah for the first time this season, of course, with Women's World Cup over. They're in a round 6 action against the Gold Coast Titans. So Carla Cowan and Madison Weatherall, they're back on the interchange bench for the Dragons, with Shianoa Amone and Marcy Carlisle, I should say, listed among the reserves. Angelina Tekaranga Katoa has also been named to start in the front row, and Sarah Reardon will be on the interchange bench after they switched late in round 5, and Bobby Law has been named in that clash there. So a nice win against the Tigers, a come from behind win by the Red V, winning by 20 points to 16 against the West Tigers, and they'll want to make it back-to-back as they try and push themselves ever so closer to potentially a semi-final berth in the NRLW competition. So best of luck to the ladies there. A little bit of re-signing news for the Dragons. If you follow us on different social media accounts, you would have seen yesterday, on Monday afternoon, the Dragons have re-signed Sione Finau until the end of 2025. He's been a real revelation in that New South Wales Cup system for the Dragons, scoring 14 tries so far this season, and along with his brother Harley, who's been in the hooker role for the Dragons in reserve grade this year. They came down from Brisbane, part of the Melbourne system. Obviously, they've had big raps on them coming to the Dragons, and Sione has got a contract until the end of 2025. I guess, to play devil's advocate for a moment, though, Kurt, the Dragons obviously pretty high on Sione Finau, but I do just wonder why it wasn't a longer-term contract, or at least the Dragons give themselves an option to potentially have a club option where they can offer a third-year contract, because I guess when you look at it on face value, it's a good signing. You've locked a good young player down for a couple of years, but what happens next year if Sione Finau plays first grade and scores something like 18 or 20 tries, and all of a sudden at the end of those 2 years his value has skyrocketed, rather than locking someone down for 3 or 4 years where you might have been able to get him for a little bit cheaper? What are your thoughts on that in terms of the re-signing?
Yeah, interesting roster management there. And look, again, we're looking from the outside, looking in. So I'm wondering if they've thrown the challenge to him, and maybe they think it might be a little bit worthwhile for them to challenge him in a different way. Different players over the years tend to respond to contracts in different ways. I mean, if he's worth it, they might upgrade him next year if he starts to kill it. So, interesting one. Sometimes if you put an option in there, it kind of dirties the water a little bit. That might be more Flanagan's go. I can't remember off the top of my head how he managed the Sharks roster and guys he was bringing through the club. But for the time being, they've got him locked down. And look, you just have to trust the process at this point. So, look, he's signed. He's signed, and it's in the Dragons' court. If he starts playing good football, they can offer him a new contract at any point.
Yeah, that's good point there, Kurt. Yeah, it's an interesting one, but at the moment he's been re-signed until the end of 2025. Now, the Dragons and Manly are locked in a bit of a tug-of-war for the signing or the signature of Michael Ennis as an assistant coach for 2024. Now, he's obviously got commitments with Fox Sports, but this would be a full-time role, whether it be with Manly, whether it be the Dragons, or whether it be somewhere else. Currently, Ennis is working with some of the younger players with the Sharks in that 15 to 18 age group. assimilating them into that Shark system, and also teaching them and training them in the style of play and the creativity that Craig Fitzgibbon wants the side to be playing. So almost kind of snatching a page from the Panthers book, where, if you don't know, I think we've spoken about it before in the podcast, where from kind of the development squads to Matt's Cup, SG Ball, Jersey Flegg, New South Wales Cup into first grade, all of those Panthers coaches are coaching the same system. They're playing the same style of football that Ivan Cleary is doing at first grade. And obviously they've got some wonderful players, but you've seen the likes of guys like Tom Jenkins and Jack Cogger and Matt Eisenhuth that have slotted in almost seamlessly to that Penrith system. So that seems to be the modus operandi at the moment for teams, and Cronulla are looking to adopt that. So Michael Ennis currently working there. He does have obviously a connection with Shane Flanagan. He was played under Shane when they won that 2016 premiership. I think he played 2 seasons under Flanagan at the Sharks. He's also got some history with the Dragons. Some of those older fans remember he played 25 games for the Dragons in 2005. I only spent the one year at the Dragons, and then went off and played with some different sides. Obviously had a long career at Canterbury before finishing his career with the Sharks. Would be the attacking coach, because at the moment Dean Young is the only other assistant that has been signed by the Dragons. He is going to be the defensive coach, so this would be for the attacking coach. And Mick Ennis was the attacking coach down with the Canberra Raiders between 2019 and 2021. They made a grand final in 2019, and I believe they made the preliminary final the following season. So, I guess that's a tick in the column for Ennis. The fact that they got within a game of the grand final and made the grand final, you've got to be scoring plenty of points to be doing that, especially at the business end of the season. So there's some ticks there. I'm certainly open to this, Kurt. I think a lot of fans are kind of clambering for Ryan Carr. I'm not a huge Ryan Carr fan. I think he's done a decent job in a difficult situation with the Dragons, and we'll talk about Ryan a little bit kind of further down the track. But I think assistant coaches have never been more important, have never been more vital in the modern game of rugby league. They're all hands on deck. They're working individually with players. They're improving players through coaching methods and styles. Obviously, the head coach is very, very important, but that's more of an overarching view of everything that's happening at training and match days and different things like that. So to get your assistant coaches right is so important. And maybe, not that this is a left field decision by the Dragons, but maybe someone like Mick Ennis that was a smart little hooker, was a bit of a grub, maybe that could kind of rub off on the Dragons, but Manly firmly in the contest as well. And yeah, I know there's plenty of people that like to live on the Northern Beaches. Maybe not me, but he's got some decisions to do. It's kind of the battle of the beaches between both Manly and the Dragons at the moment. What are your thoughts, I guess, specifically on Michael Ennis as a potential assistant coach, Kurt?
Yeah, look, a very underrated offensive mind in his time in the game. And I think sometimes the things he did on the field kind of went away or made us forget that he could play football. Look, even though he wasn't the greatest dummy half of all time, and he battled Robbie Farah for a time there after Badiris retired himself. Look, at the end of the day, if you're Michael Ennis, I believe he lives in the Shire. Does he not still live down in Cronulla?
I think he does. Yeah, I've seen him in Miranda a few times. Who's going to go to
Manly from there? Just go straight down to,
Gong. Yeah, 45 minutes.
You're next door. You're next door at the Dragons. Either way, wherever you're training, you're next door. I think the thing with Ennis too is that in retirement, the way he speaks on radio or telly or whatever he's doing, yes, a lot of players don't buy into or don't spend too much time watching themselves on telly or whatever. They spend a lot more time on Instagram and stuff like that. But when Ennis talks, he makes a lot of sense. And he's got, like you said, great connections through the game. And I think he understands that he can speak and direct and work with the younger players, but also has that old head where he can give the Dragons maybe something different in attack, where they will direct their play through the middle of the field, which the Dragons have been missing a little bit with their attack or a lot for an extended period. I saw a couple of things against the Storm on the weekend where Ben Hunt with the short slider hands to Sloan, straightening him up for a try, and then also turning Amon back through the middle. They're the kind of things Michael Ennis and Shane Flanagan would be at home. They'd be applauding that kind of stuff. So if I'm Michael Ennis, forget Manly. It's too far away. You've got to don't do it. Dragon's better option, and I think that Ennis Flanagan 1-2. That's gold for the Dragons. So get that done.
Yeah, and I think that's a good thing to mention, Kurt, because I think, obviously any time coaches are working together, they're going to naturally build a rapport over time. But if you've got someone like Michael Ennis that's played under Shane Flanagan, he knows the type of coach, the type of man that Shane Flanagan is. He can kind of seamlessly fit into that role. So I think it would be a good decision to have someone like Michael Ennis at the club. He's got a bit of a track record. We spoke about his success with Canberra and what he's doing with Cronulla. So it'd be interesting to see if that does continue down the track as well. I think he has had a bit to do with some of the Dragons players as well, involved in that under-19s New South Wales system in the past. So worked with Tyrell Sloan when he was a New South Wales under-19s representative as well. So some opportunities there for the Dragons, and good to see the Dragons looking to try and get some kind of upper tier talent, especially when it comes to the coaching ranks there with Michael Ennis. Could he potentially make a move down to Wollongong and help the Red V find some success in 2024? Last bit of news before we jump into our This Week in Dragons history is congratulations to Bobby Law from our NRLW side. She's been nominated for the Veronica White Medal for 2023. And that's in recognition of her diligent work in the community, particularly through Indigenous events and grassroots programs. So she's the club's first nominee since 2019, and that's largely due to the fact that she's made such a difference among the community, but also especially in that South Coast region. She came to the Dragons from the Knights, where she won the premiership a season ago. She's also represented the Indigenous All-Stars and the Prime Minister's 13. But she's been a real role model for the club. She's been very willing to go down and help at the different events. I know that they've had some girls-only events down in places like Kiama, down on the South Coast in that Group 7 region. And she's someone that you love to have at the club. It's such a good person and is so willing to get involved in all of the different events that the Dragons do. I know she was very heavily involved in the South Coast Group 7. That they had a White Ribbon Day Cup Rugby League Carnival a month or so ago, and she was heavily involved in that and obviously loves to be doing her work in the community. So we wish Bobby all of the best of luck, and you, the Dragons fans, can help with her winning this award. If you head directly to the Dragons website and just go to the news tab, you'll find the news article about her being nominated, and there is a link directly there that can take you to the page to vote for Bobby. So hopefully she is able to win that award. It certainly would be some recognition for some really great work that she's done for the Dragons, but also off-field for the Red V in season 2023. Okay, let's jump into one of the segments that I love so much each and every week here on the podcast, and it's This Week in Dragons History. It's when we go back and jump in our time machine and just tip our cap to the four players that have either made us enjoy watching the Dragons, or maybe they were the players or the games that we remember that got us really hooked on watching the St. George Illawarra Dragons, or the St. George Dragons, or the Steelers, if you're one of the older fans before the joint venture happened in 1999. And we'll start with the older fans, because in 1985 is our first match, the year that St. George made it all the way through to the grand final. They were really starting to amp things up at this stage of the season. Coming up this week, will be the 37-year anniversary of this game. Round 25, 1985, St. George, big winners against the Canberra Raiders down at Seifert Field, which unfortunately Canberra don't play there anymore, but that was their home ground down there in Queanbeyan for the first few years in their premiership. But St. George 50 accounted for Canberra 6. All the Dragons players were lining up to get tries. Steve Linnane playing at 5'8", he bagged a double, while Glenn Burgess, Dennis Kinchella, Mick Beattie, Michael O'Connor, Steve Morris, Perry Haddock and Billy Noak all scored tries. Michael O'Connor, 7 goals for a haul of 18 points. You can probably count the players that didn't get a try. It was Pat Jarvis, who I know you've spoken to on your Top of the Props podcast before, Kurt. Phil Ritchie, Craig Young, John Fafita and Graham Wynn, the only players in that Dragons 13-man squad that didn't find the line against the Raiders down there in front of a bit above 9,000 at the Seifert playing field there. A big win for the Dragons as they were charging through to the semi-finals. Okay, now we jump forward to round 22, in 1994. The Steelers causing a bit of an upset in 1994. They beat the Newcastle Knights by 20 points to 14 in the final game of the regular season, 11,159 at Steelers Stadium, and it was Rod Wishart with 2 tries. Nigel Roy, who many people probably don't remember the fact that he played for the Steelers. He had a long career with the North Sydney Bears, was a mainstay of those Bears side that somehow just couldn't win a premiership in the mid to late 1990s, but he scored a try as well. He scored 10 tries in what was effectively his debut season. He made 5 appearances in 1993, Nigel Roy, for the Dragons, but 1994 was when he made a name for himself, scored 10 tries in 22 games, and went on to have a pretty productive career with North Sydney. He had a career best year in 1998 when he scored 12 tries and finished his career with the Northern Eagles and finished his career in Australia with 157 games and 52 tries. But he was one of the try scorers. Rod Wishart scored 2. He also kicked 4 from 4 for a haul of 16 points for Wishy there, and it was a win by 6 points in the end against a Newcastle side that had some good names. Robbie O'Davis at fullback. You had the young brothers, Matty Johns and Andrew Johns, that were going to have such an impact on the Newcastle Knights over the next decade or so, and even some good players like Mark Sargent, Adam Muir, and Robbie McCormack, just to name a few. But the Steelers 20 accounting for Newcastle 14. And the last game we're doing is something a little bit different. Normally we talk about Big Dragons wins and the great times, but this is one that was probably one of the more painful memories as a St George Illawarra fan in recent years, and there's been many of them to choose from, but this is certainly one that stood out in my mind, Kurt, and it was the round 24 2018 game between the Dragons and Canterbury at Kogarah. Now, this game had so much emotion heading into it because in the week leading up to this, Lance Thompson very sadly passed away, and anyone that listens to this podcast knows what massive fans we are for Tomo and what a wonderful servant he was for both the St George and St George Illawarra Dragons. He'd passed away in the week preceding this game, and it was also Jason Nightingale's final home game as a Dragon. Now, he didn't end up playing. He dislocated his shoulder and was ruled out for the season, but the Dragons were, I think it's one of the worst performances I've seen. Remus Smith is, for me, is an at best average first grader, and we made him look like an absolute international that day. He scored a hat-trick. Brett Morris and Josh Morris against their former club both came in and scored tries, and Ogden off the bench also scored. Kerrod Holland 7 from 7. The Dogs were right down towards the bottom of the table. The Dragons had an opportunity to potentially play top 4 footy, and they were just swept aside. It was a pathetic performance, 38 points to 0. Sorry, I should say Jason Nightingale actually did play in that game, but I think this was the game that he did his shoulder and he was ruled out for the season. He was playing at fullback for the Dragons. I don't know if you remember this, Kurt, but it certainly stands out in my mind as a Dragons fan. So much emotion heading into it, so much on the line for the Dragons, and to be walloped by your local rivals. I know the Sharks are kind of top of the tree when it comes to local rivals, but if you chat to the old St George boys, the rivalry with Canterbury, especially from the 1980s and the early 1990s, that's right up there. And to be thumped 38-0 at Kogarah against a side that was playing so poorly that season anyway was so disappointing.
Yeah, look, unfortunately, it happens sometimes in rugby league where you look at grand finals and origins and stuff like that, big club games where you kind of play your game during the week. So I am sure that there would have been some Dragons players that kind of lived in the area at the time and kind of felt the pressure of not only Lance's passing, but Nightingale and all that stuff. So yeah, look, it does happen, and I'm sure like the players would have been so dirty about it, and they probably still talk about it sometimes as well. If I can just make it a little bit lighter for a moment about Lance Thompson, my uncle Alan Sharp, who played for Renown United and then Hurstville, is Renown and Hurstville. Yeah. He still tells the story to this day. He talks about Lance Thompson and says that bloke was 30 playing Harold Matts at that age, and said there was a rumour or a whisper that got around, and obviously bullshit at the time, but that Thompson was much older than what his birth certificate actually said, which was funny. So Lance Thompson's the original Polynesian.
Well, you speak to teammates of him, and we've spoken to a few here on the podcast that he was, he really wanted to be black, and that's what his teammates say. He wanted to be black. He listened to rap music. He loved hanging around with Nathan Blacklock and Anthony Mundine and those guys. He was just so desperate to be a black fella.
Do you know what the other thing too was, Jack? And I used to get teased about this when I played football. I'd only score 1 or 2 tries a year, but when I did score, I'd get up like I scored like 4 a game and just wouldn't touch anyone and just walk back really cash. Thompson had that about him too, but I love to. I think it may be at the back end of his career at the Sharks, where there was Peachy kind of had this thing where he would walk on the field chewing his chewing gum with a Powerade plastic cup, and Thompson would walk out last, and then a trainer would come out and he'd wink at the trainer, and then he'd bring over a towel. And that was Lance Thompson's thing. He was like, you know how LeBron does the rice or the sand or whatever the hell he does. But yeah, if you look back on some Dragons fans, tell me if this happened before he got to the Sharks. But yeah, very cool, casual character. But I didn't know that, Jack. But very funny stuff.
Yeah, unfortunately not a good afternoon for the Dragons, although they were able to turn things around and did actually make the second week of the finals in 2018. Now time to celebrate some birthdays, and gee, it's another Hall of Fame lineup. We've been regularly gifted with some great great birthdays coming up in the week ahead here on the Red V podcast, and we've got 2 very special players, and we just mentioned them, both twins that unfortunately didn't get to play their whole career with the Dragons, but tomorrow is the 37th birthday for both Brett and Josh Morris, the twins, wonderful players. First of all, we'll kind of talk about Brett. Kurt, 276 first-grade games, 176 tries, really kind of, I don't want to say reinvented himself, because I think he was always playing at such a high level, but he had such a wonderful career at the Roosters and also the Dogs after the Dragons let him go. And I think there was even an opportunity before he re-signed, before he signed with the Roosters. He was happy to come back to the Dragons, but the Dragons weren't interested. But a prolific try scorer, probably the only time he wasn't a prolific try scorer was for the New South Wales Blues, and that's because he played in that such a dominant era where Queensland were just so much better than New South Wales. Played 18 games for New South Wales and scored 5 tries, while in Australian colours, 18 games, 23 tries. That's incredible, including 9 tries and 5 World Cup games. Made his debut for the Dragons in 2006. There's that, I guess, iconic try where he, in 2006, where he leapt high above the Broncos to score as an 18-year-old, and then Aaron Gorrell landed the last-minute conversion at Suncorp as the Dragons got a last-minute win. But it was through the Wayne Bennett years that the cream really rose to the top. In 2009, when the Dragons got knocked out in the second week of the semi-finals, he scored 25 tries in 24 games, followed it up with 20 tries in the 2010 season as the Dragons won the premiership, and then still reached double-digit figures a few more years down the track. 10 tries in 2011, 14 in 2012, and then 14 again in 2014. He then left the Dragons. He scored 10 and 11 games for Canterbury in 2016, 12 tries with the Roosters in 2020, and in 2021, which was his final year when I think he tore his ACL in a game for the Roosters, and that was the end of it. He'd scored 11 tries in 7 games as I think a 34 or 35-year-old. So it just showed he was just an incredible player. Positional play was fantastic. Certainly vaunted for what he did with football in hand, Kurt, and just the blitzing speed that he had. I can remember that try he scored for the Dragons against Manly at Wollongong. I think it was in 2009, where he basically kind of like ran in between the goalposts at one end and outran all of the Manly players and ran about 90 metres to score. But a really good defender as well. We speak so much about the positional play of our Dragons players and how poor it is and rushing in and making bad decisions. There wasn't too many bad defensive decisions from Brett Morris. He did a lot of great work at the other end of the park, but I thought he was a really solid defensive winger. Him and JC Nightingale probably go down in terms of the joint venture as the 2 best wingers we've had.
Yeah, easily. And I wish he did stay at the Dragons longer than he did. I think both those Morris boys, particularly Josh, I think Brett's starting to get some credit now for his career already. Because I think for a time there, Brett kind of not superseded Josh, but went further along as a winger and developed further than Josh did as a centre. And I think that wasn't Josh's fault, because the game kind of caught up to centres at that point as well, where the centres weren't as important as wingers or, say, middles or fullbacks or whatever. But Brett Morris, you talk about both those guys. In 30 years, we'll be talking about Brett Morris as one of the greatest wingers of all time. And Josh Morris too, like I said, I still don't think Matt Cooper gets the credit he gets at this point as a centre. And yes, Mark Gasnier is Mark Gasnier and all that stuff. But if I had to pick a team, I'd be picking Matt Cooper in my side before Gasnier. And that might be a big call for Dragons fans. But that kind of goes away from what I'm saying a little bit. But Brett Morris, a true athlete that got better with age and understood his body better as he went on. And I think he took advantage of the Roosters' system and their program and made him kind of get through week to week a little bit better. And obviously, as the Dragons kind of fell away a little bit, the Roosters, he obviously went into a system where he was a chance of winning a comp immediately and had some incredible players inside him. That kind of pushed him along a little bit further, and he took advantage of the fact that the wingers became more advantageous for players. Brett Morris, I'll say it now because in 20 years we'll be saying it anyway, one of the greatest wingers that I'll ever see. And I think we take it for granted because they're twins as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's lost on us too, is that because they look so similar, we just kind of lose a little bit in translation when we talk about the two. But if you break them down side by side, Josh Morris will be a great of the modern game. Brett Morris will go down as one of the greatest wingers of the game, I think, over a longer distance.
Yeah, Josh, certainly no slouch. 325 first-grade games.
I'm not trying to disrespect Josh at all. Different positions, different players.
158 tries in 325 games. It almost seems it doesn't seem right that they didn't play inside each other for their whole career at the Dragons. Famously kind of forced out of the club due to salary cap restraints at the Dragons. Only played 46 games across the first two seasons and 20 tries. And I think a few fans remember early on in his career played a bit of fullback for the Dragons in that 2007 season, played some wing, played centre, but he was one of the best defensive centres in the competition at that time, and was a prolific try scorer in a fair few seasons. In his first season with the Dogs in 2009, that's when they finished second to the Dragons in the premiership in the regular season. He scored 22 tries in 21 games, 14 tries in 2010, and then in 2012 when they made the grand final, he scored 17 tries, so knew how to find the stripe and also finished his career at the Sydney Roosters as well. So, both incredible family and incredible players. So we do celebrate them, the Keimer boys, and we hope that they do enjoy their 37th birthday tomorrow on Wednesday, the 23rd of August. Another player that's celebrating a birthday this week in a couple of days on Thursday is Joel Thompson. We spoke about Joel a few weeks ago on the podcast. A really quality player, a wonderful human being, has done some great things in the rugby league space, has done great things in the mental health space and the Indigenous community. 234 games for him, including 62 tries, played a few seasons at the Dragons, having started his career at Canberra, spent 4 seasons at the Red V, and ended up playing a total of 85 games for them, 89 for Canberra, and also 60 for Manly, finishing his career, and then went across and played 19 games with St Helens in the 2021 season. Just as absolute tough as nails, ran a really hard edge, developed from a really quality centre and outside back into one of the premier back rowers in the competition. And the Dragons would love to have someone of his ilk at the club at the moment. Won the Ken Stevens Medal in 2016 for his great work in the community, and we salute him and hope that he does enjoy his 35th birthday coming up a little bit later this week. Moving through the legends, the next man is Kevin Ryan, or Kandos, as he was famously known, the Dragons legend. He'll be celebrating his 89th birthday. He was the Clive Churchill Medal winner in 1965 and really was one of the hardest men in rugby league, was such an integral part to that St George side in the 1950s and 1960s. But what you might not know about him was he was an amateur boxing champion from Queensland. Queensland originally, Ipswich up there, and he was beaten in a trial for the 1960 Rome Olympics. But then he went across and played rugby union, and he was a member of the Queensland side for the next 6 seasons. And then he had success with the Wallabies and the Australian national side in the late 1950s, but then came to St George in 1960, won 7 grand finals with them, and he had ball skills as a prop, ball playing skills as a prop when. That's only something that's really kind of come into our game the last 15 or 20 years. Imagine what it would have been like to have a player like that in the 1960s, and that's exactly who Kevin Ryan was. I guess it's kind of a little bit funny because he had such an amazing career with the Dragons. It kind of seemed ironic that in 1967 he went to not the Bulldogs, the Berries as they were called, Canterbury Bankstown, and was kind of the orchestrator for the Dragons' defeat in the 1967 preliminary final. But he also moved into politics after that. He became a New South Wales Labor politician. Mate, someone needs to do a movie, or I know there's a book. There's books out about Kevin Ryan, a documentary series, because this is a guy that almost made it to the Rome Olympics as an amateur boxer, played rugby union for Australia, won premierships with St George, caused the downfall in some small part of the Dragons' 11 premierships in a row, and then obviously had quite a good career at the back end of his career with the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs, and then goes on to have a career in politics. It's quite incredible. And actually, he is or was the father-in-law of Jason Donnelly, the St George player that played in the early to mid 1990s as well. So yeah, he's a very famous person, and it's so great, Kurt, isn't it, to see one of those legendary players from the 50s and 60s still alive and kicking and about to celebrate his 89th birthday.
Yeah, look, and I think I've mentioned this before, when I was making up a list, the top of the props, my dad, who grew up in kind of around Hurstville and also Wollongong before that, said, mate, you got to get Kevin Ryan. I said, well, what about him? He said, apart from the fact that everything you just said, he's still going. He's alive and kicking. And up at that point, I think he was still practicing as a barrister. So this is a couple of years ago. He was the mayor of Hurstville.
Yeah.
And look, the scariest thing about him too, from what I remember in these Dragons books, is his defensive style. He would tackle with his chest first and knock you out before he even got his arms around you. You're right. I can't believe that someone that shed so much blood and did it in 2 different codes went on to do so much other things in the game. I mean, it's ridiculous. And one day we'll get there. We've spoken about it before, Jack, that rugby league needs its own WWE network, and one day we'll get all these documentaries and TV shows that we're all asking for, and he definitely deserves one. He's just a bloody legend. And when you talk about immortals, no one talks about Kevin Ryan, and there's some other blokes to get there first, but overall, just if you want to talk about a new wing of immortals, about representing rugby league in different avenues, in the world, I mean, he's up there. He really is. I don't know what else to say. He did such a good intro. He was a great player, and then also went to the Dogs as well. Did you mention that? Was there something at SCG where the Dogs beat St George at the SCG?
Yeah, the 1967 preliminary final. Yeah, they beat St George 11-10.
Yeah, and that was Kevin Ryan playing for the Dogs, wasn't it?
Yeah. He moved across there, and he was also in the kind of latter part. After that, was part of the team that led the defeat of the New South Wales Rugby League's draft system when Terry Hill was famously forced to play for the Sydney's Eastern Surge Roosters back then, and defeated that in the High Court. So yeah, has done some amazing things in rugby league, an absolute giant of the game, and we salute him as he is about to celebrate his 89th birthday here on the 26th of August, and hopefully he's having a cold one or maybe a nice coffee or some birthday cake, and we thank him for the great times that he's given to the St George Dragons Football Club, and hopefully still invested in rugby league as a product as well. And we finish with another superstar, a man that's about to celebrate his 69th birthday next Monday, and it's none other than Joe Cool, John Doherty, one of the great fullbacks of the 1970s and 1980s. You talk about prolific: 239 first-grade games, 55 tries, 554 goals, 11 field goals, a total of 1,298 points, over 100 career victories in his total of his career. A man that played all over the world. He played New South Wales country. He played 2 times for Australia. He started his career with West and was part of that Western Serb squad that was, moulded by Roy Masters and Tommy Raudonikis as the captain, as the Fibros, the working class guys from Western Sydney that went within a whisker of playing in the 1978 grand final and were regularly there or thereabouts in the top 5, and really kind of burst onto the scene. Made his debut in 1974. He scored 6 tries, 72 goals and a field goal in his debut year, and then better that in 1975 when he played all 22 regular season games, 11 tries, 76 goals, and 185 points. He played with West until 1979, and then kind of a little bit funny, after those great battles between the Fibros, Western Serbs, and the Silvertails, the Mandaringa Seagulls, he went over to Manly in 1980, having finished with West in 1979. Played just the 2 seasons with Manly in 1980 and 1981, and then was the first ever captain of the Illawarra Steelers in 1982, because he was from that Illawarra region, that South Coast region, and he spent 4 seasons, 4 pretty difficult seasons at the Steelers. They didn't have a lot of quality there. 1984 was their best year under Brian Smith when he was coach, when they won 12 and lost 12, but ironically enough, Doherty only played 7 games that year due to injury, but he continued to kind of show and prove the doubters wrong, even after leaving the Steelers and being out of the game in 1986. Spent 3 seasons and played 37 games with the Bears in 1987, 1988 and 1989, which was invaluable to some of these younger players, the likes of kind of Greg Florimo and David Fairley and those guys that came through that North Sydney Bears system, because only a couple of years after he left, North would play in that 1991 preliminary final and would go on to another preliminary final only 3 years after that. So a wonderful career, a great goal kicker. We've been lucky enough to have him on the podcast, so feel free to go back through the archives and find that here and just punch that into Google. It was a very, very generous man with his time, a wonderful player, and also carved out a pretty good career in England as well. Played with Hull KR and also Halifax. He also coached Wigan over there. There's a great yarn that we had with him about him kind of being forced out despite him winning, winning the premiership or winning the Challenge Cup in one of the last years that he was there. But we salute Joe Cool as he celebrates his 69th birthday this forthcoming Monday. A great servant for the south coast of New South Wales, a great servant of the Illawarra Steelers, and we hope that Joe's throwing back a cold one there on Monday and gets a chance to just relax and you have a lovely 69th birthday. Almost time for us to finish off our This Week in Dragons history, but before we do that, we're going to have the Who Am I this week on the Red V podcast. Now, the Who Am I is a player that was born on the 20th of April 1972 in Wollongong. They spent their career at both the Illawarra Steelers and the Parramatta Eels, playing a total of 103 games, scoring 19 tries. They also played 1 game for Italy in 1999. That was in the Mediterranean Cup, which was a little bit different because this particular player wasn't playing first grade rugby league at the time, but did play 1 game for Italy in 1999 and also played for them in the Rugby League Emerging Nations Tournament in 2000. That isn't listed as an official appearance, but he did appear for them in 2000. I've got a few other clues there that I can throw in. I'm not going to throw them in just yet because I know how good you, all of you, you Dragons fans are in terms of whether it's former Dragons or former Steelers players. Kurt, have I given you enough clues? Have I kind of at least opened the door to the era of the player that you're thinking about?
Well, the mind's a bit of a mush at the moment, but I can knock 2 off the list because Pinchinelli played for the Steelers and the Knights. Skifoletti played for Parramatta, did not play for the Knights, and also played Super League. So they're the 2 Italian names I've got so far. and I'll leave it there because I have no idea.
Well, we've got a few more clues, and we'll give them a little bit later in the podcast before we reveal all. Looking forward to revealing this one a little bit later on in the podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in to episode 188 of the Red V podcast. As always, you can get in contact with us if there's something we've mentioned that you'd like to know more about, or maybe you disagree with what we're saying. We'd love to hear your feedback. redvpodcast@gmail.com. That's redvpodcast@gmail.com. Time for us to take our first break here on episode 188 of the Red V podcast. On the other side of that, we'll review that 38 points to 28 loss against Melbourne. Again, the Dragons in the battle for more than an hour, but unfortunately just couldn't pull the game out of the fire against a good Melbourne side after the Dragons at one stage did lead by 18 points to 4. That's coming up next here on episode 188 of the Red V podcast.
NFL Sunday Ticket is now on YouTube and YouTube TV, which means that it just got easier to be an NFL fan, even if you live far away. Like maybe you like the Bears, but you're hibernating in Panthers territory. But with NFL Sunday Ticket, your out-of-market team is never more than a short distance away. Specifically, the distance from you to your remote control. NFL Sunday Ticket, now on YouTube and YouTube TV. Go to youtube.com/presale to get $50 off.
Terms and embargoes apply. Offer ends 9/19. No refund. Subscription auto-renews.
Match review time here on the Red V podcast. The Dragons going down to Melbourne on Saturday night. It was the last home game at Wollongong for the season for the Red V, and despite racing out to an 18 points to 4 lead at an early stage in that game, they were overrun by a Storm side that just were able to kick into gear. Willie Warbrick bagged a hat-trick, and Jerome Hughes was stylish in the halves for the Melbourne Storm, and they were just had a little bit too much for the Dragons. Kurt, you've kind of seen a little bit of the highlights and the mini match on KO recently. What did you make of that overall performance from the Dragons?
I don't think you can ask much more of what you got. I think before the game, you take 18 all at half time against the top 4 Storm. The other part, I'm sure, of Dragons fans is, well, if we can get to 18-4, why can we leak it back to 18 all before half time? Again, it's rocks and diamonds. You're trying to become a better team, but you're also competing against a great team. There's a bit of attention to detail. The Storm's first try on the blind side, the Dragons centre the winger went with him, and they both come up with nothing. And it really wasn't even a pressure situation. The Storm went left, really slow, play the ball, where even to the point where the crowd was baying for a forward pass penalty, so they took the tackle. And there was nothing doing. It was a decoy play, and they went up, and it was crap. I like the fact that the Dragons hit back straight away, and I like the way they did it. They looked like they were playing some football. They didn't look scared. They kind of were a little bit more relaxed. The Billy Burns try I loved. That was pretty classy. I said a few weeks ago he's a big gangly thing. And yes, we have spoken about Billy Burns in this podcast a lot because I think it's not fair to him because I don't think that they were looking after him the right way. I think now it's kind of like the shackles are off a little bit. And he's very, very good in close quarters. I still don't know what position's his best position. I don't know if he needs to go to the gym and put on 10 kilos and become a real strong, hard-running second rower, or if you keep the weight off and just see where he goes. The hunt try to Sloan, I thought was brilliant because I guarantee the Storm weren't scouting for that. So if you look at Ben Hunt when he gets the ball on that right-hand side, at any time in attack in that 20 or 30, when they're going to that right-hand side, it's usually a crossfield kick or it's a really, really deep, slow, methodical block play and they get caught in a corner. All of a sudden, the Storm aren't thinking that. They've built some pressure, and Sloan comes back on the inside shoulder. Thought that was beautiful. And then they back it up. They hit it up by changing a direction. And of all people, Amon running the ball off Ben Hunt, and they score again.
Yeah.
I think for Dragons fans, if you want to take something out of this game, you turn the game off right there. If you're going to watch the replay again, turn it off at 18-4, put it back on in the second half when they bounce back again, because that's the Dragons that you're going to see in the next couple of years. I thought it was a really good game of football where obviously the defensive reads are just, some of it's really, really shit. But I think we're going to see some of those players being bled out of the team. But look, it's the Melbourne Storm. They're top 4. They're about to get Pappenhausen back. That was a great game from the Dragons. I thought they played really well. What do you think?
Yeah, I liked your thoughts about Billy Burns because I'm happy to give credit where it's due, and he's been really good over the last month or so for the Dragons. He's probably one of the players, and I think this is the thing about next year that I'm excited about is the fact that Flanagan's coaching and his methodology can help improve players. I think a lot of media pundits, ourselves included, fans are kind of writing off next year, and maybe next year is a write-off. Maybe the Dragons only end up winning 5 or 6 games again, but I'm excited that Flanagan can improve players like Billy Burns, guys like Francis Molo, Jacob Little. I think we've got some quality in this roster that they could improve tenfold under someone like Shane Flanagan, having a really good off-season, making sure they're fit. He's brought the right people into the club, it seems, in that strength and conditioning unit. So, I think for Billy Burns, he's really shown some fight towards the end of this season. And who knows, that might be because he's playing for a contract, but I think he's one player that could develop into a pretty handy edge back rower. Conceding the Dragons are pretty short in that in that kind of position, Kurt, because you've got maybe Jack Bird plays there next year. I still prefer him as a 13, but if Jack Bird and Jaden Stewart are going to be your 2 starting edge back rowers, then I have no problem with Billy Burns being a player that comes off the bench and plays 30 or 35 minutes, because I think the days of Jack Bird playing 80 minutes are gone. Like, I think if the Dragons really care about his health and care about his well-being, whether it's playing at lock or centre or back row or fullback or 5'8", wherever he's playing, I just don't think you can be expecting him to get through 80 minutes per week and 4 or 5 training sessions per week with his rheumatoid arthritis and the issues he's had with his knees and shoulders and that kind of stuff. So I think Billy Burns, if he can continue on this northerly trajectory, Kurt, then he's a really good foil to come off the bench. And yeah, he does have some defensive deficiencies, but what we've seen with his attack, you probably can't teach that. You can't teach that tackle breaking ability, that ability to find the line. And in the few years he's been at the Dragons, he has a really good knack of finding the try line. You can't train or teach those kinds of things necessarily to a player. Whereas the defensive side of the ball, someone like a Dean Young and a Shane Flanagan working with Billy Burns in pre-season could really improve on that. And I think his defense has been pretty good over the last month.
Yeah, look, I think at this point, I tried not to look at the defensive reads from the Dragons on the weekend. The upside of the Dragons is for a team that's running 16th. They're attacking like a team that's like midfield. They're not attacking like a team. And yes, the pressure's off again. And I'm sure Dragons fans can say, yeah, Curtis, yeah, it's all easy to say that now because the season's gone. But you are actually seeing now the structure of Griffin being broken away, strip by strip. And you're actually seeing week by week players actually playing what's in front of them, bit of ad-lib football. Not just all ad-lib football, because if it wasn't a Ben Hunt short pass to Sloan and holding that line up, Sloan doesn't go through for the try. If it's not for Ben Hunt engaging that first attacker and dropping that ball with a perfect line and Amon coming back on the inside, that try doesn't happen either. And if it wasn't for what the Dragons created before the try for Billy Burns doesn't get the chance to score that try either. But it's all talent that gets them there at the end. It's the creativity before that and putting doubts in the minds of the defenders. So I think the Dragons are onto something. I wouldn't worry too much right now about your defensive issues, because I think we can all agree that the problems for the Dragons are their outside backs and the way they read the play. So if they're not going to be there next year, bonus. If they are going to be there, they're going to be recoached and retrained, bonus. So right now, if you're the Dragons, the last 2 games of the season, if you're going to get beaten or you're going to get in the game, don't let anything come through the middle. Make the other teams score around you, because that's their game plan anyway. But I love the ad-lib football, the Dragons on the weekend. Forget about the defensive stuff. I think the Dragons the last couple of months, they are starting to show that there are football players inside these robots that originally were football players, if that makes sense. I think they're enjoying it, and I think they're really excited to get to pre-season. I'd be very interested to see how big their Mad Monday is, and I would expect that it's a very short one, if nothing at all, and a quite lock the doors and, at wherever you are, at the league's club, lock the doors for 24 hours, do whatever you want, but get back into the football straight away. Because I think the players are excited because you can see they're excited with the way they're actually playing with the football.
Kurt, I wanted to talk about Ryan Carr because I know there's been a few questions in our fan corner segments, and I think a lot of fans are really high on Ryan Carr. And what I will say about him is I think he has done a really good job of being passionate about the Dragons, going into bat for his players, and just kind of, you can tell that he loves the players and the playing group likes him. But I think kind of what we touched on earlier in the podcast about Michael Ennis maybe coming in as an assistant coach, I just think that's a much bigger upgrade on someone like Ryan Carr. Like, maybe it's not fair to completely put the miserable 2023 season we've had on him. Obviously, Griffin and the signings that he's brought in have failed, and Ryan Carr has basically inherited this squad. But I don't know if I've seen enough from Ryan Carr to really be excited about him being an assistant coach. He's obviously a great bloke. He's someone that the players love, and he's passionate, and I love all those things. I love that he's taking the attack to the referees boss, Graham Annesley, with all the ridiculous calls the Dragons have had that have gone against them, especially in this second half of the year. But I think the Dragons are better to go in a direction of someone like a Michael Ennis or not necessarily a more experienced assistant coach, but I just don't feel very comfortable about Ryan Carr particularly being the Dragons assistant coach, because I don't know how much improvement we would see from the Dragons with him, because I still think he's fairly inexperienced, and he kind of has bounced around a few different clubs. I feel like fans are getting quite attached to him because he's a likable guy, and he's a bit of a character, and he's got a strong personality. But if I'm the Dragons, I'm not going all in on Ryan Carr to be the assistant coach next year. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I get your point, and firstly I'll say that anyone that takes on the job after Anthony Griffin, when they know they're probably not going to be the next first-grade coach, he is a ballsy guy.
Yeah.
So he took that on, and maybe he was offered it, maybe he put his hand up. I don't know. And then again, you can also say, well, if the pressure's off and the Dragons you can't make the 8, then obviously they're gonna play a bit more football as well. I'm just saying that the Dragons have opened up a little bit with their attack, and it's taken week by week. Like, we're talking about peeling an onion, layer after layer after layer. I don't know if you have to pick out of the two, out of Ennis or Ryan Carr. I said several weeks ago that it would be advantageous for Flanagan to keep Ryan Carr there as some sort of assistant coach, because every club's got, 3, 4, 5, 6 different people in their staff now. So he could fit in somewhere, even in an advisory role, if he takes on next year, like Flegg or New South Wales Cup or whatever it might be. But I think it'd be advantageous if the players are reacting to Ryan Carr. If I was Flanagan, I would love to chew his ear off and say, okay, you were here 12 months ago with Griffin. What was not working then and what's working now? And also too, that there's stuff that Carr can give Flanagan when he comes in. So I'm not saying that Carr needs to be, or it's either Carr or Ennis. I think that at least for a 12-month contract, that Ryan Carr gets to stay at the Dragons in some form. And because I think the players have reacted to him. And yes, like I said, it's very easy to react to a guy that's not there next year, and you can let your head in a little bit and play some football, but it's not like they're giving up 40, 50 points in a game and not trying. I can see them trying more in attack now than they did at the start of the year, if that makes sense. They're less structured, but they're trying more now, and they're playing more football now. So it's a different story if you got a 4-year contract and it starts next year, and they play the way they do now, and they get flogged. I still think there's some upside to keeping him there. But look, I agree with you. Ennis needs to be there. I'd love Ennis to be at the Dragons, but I think Ryan Carr, if they do keep him there, there's a reason to keep him there, because I think he can help Flanagan and Ennis find their feet and maybe be that link between the players a little bit to start with. But yeah, I think Ryan Carr's proved himself enough to maybe get a gig over in the Super League if it's not long term with the Dragons, but who knows? But I don't think it's a choice out of Ennis and Carr. I think there's plenty of space there to keep Carr there for at least next year and see what happens.
Yeah.
Just as an advisor or something like that.
Yeah, we'll have to see what happens, because I know the West Tigers are sniffing around. That's kind of been the rumour on the rumour mill lately, that, yeah, maybe he might go to the West Tigers under Benji Marshall, but we'll have to keep tabs and see what happens in regards to that. We might take a break there, put a pin in it, folks, and then we'll jump into more Dragons news. We'll preview the match against the Warriors happening this weekend, the second last game of the season. The Dragons looking to try and get a victory over in New Zealand. We'll be talking about that and a lot more next here on the Red V podcast. The Dragons travel over to New Zealand this weekend, a match against the Warriors, as the Warriors try and further entrench themselves inside the top four, and the Dragons desperately just looking to get one or two more victories before the season is done. The ultimate task, isn't it, Kurt, travelling over to New Zealand? What kind of effect does that have on not just the Dragons travelling this week, but travelling sides now they have to go over to New Zealand? It's a 3-hour trip over there. You obviously got to stay overnight, and it's a pretty hostile reception that you get over in the land of the NZ now with just how well the Warriors are playing.
Yeah, look, I would think of it the other way. The Warriors have to do it many more times during the season than the other clubs. I think of this as a challenge for the Dragons. And I think they're up for it. I think the Warriors are a wonderful team. They're at home. They've got momentum. But sides have proved they can go over there and match the Warriors for extended periods. This all sounds the same for Dragons fans. But I think the Dragons are going to go good for a long period. I think they'll get dusted in the last 5-10 minutes, but that's the Warriors' way too. They'll get a bit of momentum, but I don't think the challenge is as big as it used to be. I think these Dragons players, the way they are playing, just as a neutral, I think they're going to go over there and prove themselves. I don't know if they can win. But again, it's a great little challenge for the Dragons. It really is. And if they had two more games at home, let's say this week they're at Wollongong again, or two last games at Cogra against, say, the Titans and West or whatever. But this is good homework for Shane Flanagan, and I think this is a good test for the Dragons. So, what do you think? I'm not as worried about them going to Auckland. It sounds like as you, Jackie. What do you reckon?
Oh, I just don't see them winning. Like, I think it's just feeble to even, it feels like a bit of a waste of time doing these match previews, because personally I think they've forgotten how to win. I think it's all good and well to have these little morale victories of, we played well for 50 minutes, or they played well for 60 minutes. And I think where the fan base are proud the club is staying in contests. But at the same time, even though we don't have a great roster, it is incredibly frustrating week after week to be leading a side or be in with a chance of winning the game with 15 or 20 minutes to go and not be able to pull it out of the bag. I think it's a losing mentality at the club, which makes sense when you've had someone like Anthony Griffin at the club that was a complete cancer at the club, that brought in over the hill vets and people that had no business being close to a professional rugby league organisation. So yeah, I can't see any possibilities of the Dragons winning. Like you, again, I think they'll compete. And for what it's worth, the Dragons have a pretty decent record when it comes to their time over in New Zealand. They actually haven't played there since 2018. They lost to the Warriors in round 7, 2018 by 20 points to 12, but they won in Waikato the year before that in 2017, and there was a period in between 2010 and 2014 where 2015 they won 5 straight in New Zealand, including 3 straight at Mount Smart. So yeah, it's probably not as daunting as I'm making it out to be. I just think it's been a bit of a horrid road trip for sides in 2023, and I think the Dragons, especially with only 2 games to go, they're probably willing the season to end, and I think the Warriors are really kind of gearing up perhaps for something special this season.
Yeah, you could be right, Jack. I mean, look, the for parts of this podcast this year, I have been pumping up the Dragons and saying, there's upside here and there's upside there. But the teams that are going over to Auckland, they're not getting smashed, but they are falling into the fireworks, the drums, the momentum, all that kind of stuff. And like I said, it's a good test for the Dragons. You'll know after about 30 minutes if they're not up for it. The Dragons don't. Usually, the Dragons when they're up and about, they're scoring a couple of tries or bouncing back when they've fallen behind. I just don't see them doing it. I just think they're up for the last 2 games. I could be completely wrong, but. Yeah.
Well, this is the same Tigers side that annihilated us down at Wollongong, where Sean Johnson and Dallin Watene-Zelezniak.
I'll take that.
Yeah, they took us apart. So I think that's what worries me is the fact they identified the weaknesses on the edge for the Dragons. And if Lomax doesn't play, it's obviously a big boost if he does play. But if he doesn't play, I feel like the edges are even kind of weaker than they were down at Wollongong on that night. So I think that probably fills me with a bit of trepidation. And I imagine Ryan Webster at this stage of the season doesn't want to see the Warriors play good football for 40 or 50 minutes and then clock off for the final 30. If they play really well for 80 minutes and Sean Johnson dominates like he has been for most of the season and is backed up by Tohu Harris and Mitch Barnett and a lot of those other kind of earnest performers, then yeah, like I'm not saying the Dragons are going to get belted by 50 or 60, but I feel like it could be pretty similar to what we saw on that cool Friday night where the Dragons were beaten pretty easily by the Warriors in the end.
Yeah, look, and I'll bundle a couple of answers here from the run sheet into one. I think the Dragons expect to bleed a few tries down the sides. Not just because their defensive reads are so bad. There's combinations right now defensively. They are the worst in the comp by a mile. They're going to bleed some tries on the outside to, DWZ and guys like that because the Warriors are so clinical at the moment. It's just how they bounce back. So you'll know, Jack, as a Dragons fan, pretty quickly, if something happens like bounce of the ball or a chip and chase and the Warriors score a try off a tap back, a bomb hits the goal post and a Warriors, the hooker scores another post, catching it on the full or 100-meter break. If the Dragons don't bounce back and score in the next couple of minutes, you're in trouble. That's how I'd say, even that Melbourne game last week, they bounced back and kept playing and skipping around the field and finding lines and finding holes. But you'll know pretty quickly, I think, on the weekend if the Dragons are up to playing the Warriors. And yeah, I said the Warriors are, the Warriors are a great team, but they haven't really put a bunch of points really quickly on teams. They've been lucky a few times, but you make your own luck too. So yeah, it's a good test. I understand what you're saying, Jack. It could go either way. But the way this podcast has gone this year, like we make predictions and then we come out and say, it's the same question in match review every week. The Dragons were close. What went wrong?
Yeah.
I can only go off that. So form says the Dragons compete, but we'll see what happens on the weekend.
Yeah, the Dragons are looking for a victory down there in New Zealand, and we'll have a full match review of that on next week's podcast. Time for us to take one more break here on the Red V podcast, then we're going to wrap things up. We'll have a look at the lower grade results for the Dragons and answer your fans' corner questions. Let's take a look at the lower grades this week on the Red V podcast. Spoiler alert, it's not a very happy viewing for fans of the Red V. The New South Wales Cup side, they had the bye on the weekend, so they got the 2 competition points. But when it came to the Jersey Fleek side, it was a pretty insipid display in round 25 that all but extinguished the Dragons' hopes. They were destroyed by Manly, 48 points to 6 at 4 Points Park. And even despite having a couple of those New South Wales Cup guys dropping down, the likes of Nick Zagranis, Jackson Sherab, and Ben Rumble all getting a chance to play, it didn't matter as that Manly ran in 10 tries to 1. It could have been more than a half a century of points put on them, but the Eagles only kicked 4 goals out of 10, so a very disappointing result there for the Dragons. With the knock-on effect, New South Wales Cup side having had a bye last week, they're just playing for pride now. They take on the third-place Warriors at Zeems Park down in Corrimal on Saturday afternoon, a 1 o'clock kickoff down there. The Dragons have a chance to at least get some victories to end the season and maybe dent the Warriors' chances of finishing inside that top 3, which would be the double chance in that New South Wales Cup competition. And we will run through that side and how they do line up in just a moment. Meanwhile, in the Jersey Fleet Cup competition, the Dragons have the bye along with the South Sydney Rabbitohs. So that is them done for the season. They won't be playing anymore this season. So that loss officially rules the Dragons out of any chance of playing finals footy in 2023, which means, unfortunately, unless the Dragons NRLW side can play finals, we won't have any side representing us in the finals in 2023. Let's run through and see how the Dragons do line up for that clash against the New Zealand Warriors. Trey Stewart has been named at fullback. Alex Lobb and Sione Finau, who's recently re-signed, are on the wings, with Tata Moga and Sevelia Tamale in the centres. Paul Turner the 5'8", and Zach Herring is the halfback. Viliami Fafita starting at prop, which is good to see, alongside Nick Luitoso. Hale Finau is the starting number 9. While the back row for the Dragons, Jackson Sherab, Nick Sagranis and Alex Tuatavake, while Declan Purcell, Hamish Stewart, Jet Liu and Loco Jr. Pacific Tonga. Good to see him getting a spot on the bench for the New South Wales Cup side, having played SG ball with the St George Dragons to start his 2023 campaign. So a chance there for the Dragons to perhaps create a boil over towards the end of the season and damage some hopes there for the Warriors. And then in the final game, that is the final game of the season, I should say, for the Dragons. So that is the last game for them, and then the finals will start the following week. So if the last time you'll get a chance to see the Dragons New South Wales Cup side in action there against the Warriors. To finish off the podcast, we're going to be jumping in and taking a look at your Fans Corner questions for this week, and we've again got some real doozies, some cracking questions that have been asked. Our first question's from Janet, which we've kind of addressed a little bit. She said, interested in Ryan Carr's future with the Dragons. I thought I read Flanagan had him for next season. Cheers, Janet. Well, nothing's been confirmed by the Dragons, so he certainly hasn't been offered a contract by the Red V as of yet. I know the West Tigers are sniffing around as well. I think we've kind of both given our opinions, so we won't kind of spend too much time on this, but yeah, I think that's going to be one to keep an eye on, especially towards the end of the season, because I think once Shane Flanagan finishes officially with Manly, or even when he finishes unofficially with the Manly Sea Eagles, I think we'll kind of see the chains moving a little bit there for the Dragons. But I think in the next kind of 3 to 4 weeks, we'll get a bit more clarity about what's going to happen in that assistant coach space for the Dragons. Kurt, our next question comes from Andrew Dunstan, and he says, who is our halfback in 2026? Is there someone coming through the ranks, or are we going to have to find a marquee somewhere?
Oh, Andrew, there's so much to happen before then. Look, players get dropped, and look, Jack might be able to help me out with some gun halves coming through the ranks. But players get dropped, players get released, and I'm talking about other clubs here. Coaches and players fall out, vice versa. It happens so quickly in rugby league where an agent or a manager will start spruiking a player, and if the team's not performing, it all happens very, very quickly. I would be, Andrew, concentrating on the players you have short-term who's available in other positions and worry about those spots, and then worry about halfback more when we get a little bit closer to that. It's still only 2023.
Well, and Kurt, we see
there's still time,
it doesn't necessarily happen every year, but every kind of couple of years and sometimes once a year, we see a particular player is signed by a club, and it kind of sends everything kind of goes crazy in the transfer market. So that can lead to a good number 6 or a good number 7 kind of being out there. And I think what we spoke about a little bit off air before about the rich area that the Dragons have down in the South Coast, but also in the St George region as well, is that other players can pop up. At the moment, they've got Licken King Porgia, who's a really good, stylish player. He's probably more of a 5'8" than a halfback, but he's played a combination of both in both Jersey Flegg and New South Wales Cup, and also Zach Herring. I think King Porgia probably more of a kind of your organising half, and this is no disrespect to either of those players, but they're probably neither players that people are going to say, oh, this is a gun player, like this is someone that's going to change the outlook of the joint venture for the next decade or so. But I think they're players that can be serviceable. So there's a couple of young guys coming up, and yeah, as Kurt mentioned, Andrew, 2026, 2025, that's a long time away, and there could be some young players that pop up through SG Ball and Maddie's Cup and those kind of competitions and Jersey Flegg over those next 2 to 3 years under Flanagan. Or it might be that Flanagan signs a good young half from Cronulla or from Manly or something like that. Like Luke Metcalf was, who knew who Luke Metcalf was 2 or 3 years ago? And now look at him, he's one of the form halves. He's got a great combination with Sean Johnson, and there's a good chance that he could be playing, well, there's a solid chance he could play in a preliminary final or maybe even a grand final. So there's players out there. It's like I'm probably guilty of this myself, and it can be doom and gloom sometimes with the Dragons, but I think Shane Flanagan is a player that will be able to identify talent, and there's always going to be young halves playing. And not every team's going to be able to hold on to them. Some are going to fall through the cracks, and just got to hope the Dragons have got the right people in the right positions to make those calls, Andrew. Our next question comes from Sean Ganano on Twitter. He said, with all the talk about Lomax or Sloan in a two-way battle for fullback, do you guys think the club has I'll try that again. Do you guys think the club don't reckon Cody Ramsey will play again? He seems to be the forgotten man for 2024. I'm hopeful we will see him again in the Red V. Well, I'll handle this one, Sean. I don't think anyone really knows. It's kind of a bit of an unknown territory with Cody, because it's a pretty significant autoimmune condition that he's running through at the moment. He's lost a lot of weight, which is something we've mentioned here on the podcast before. And it's not just the weight; it's the muscle that he's lost. He's obviously a lot smaller than he was when he was last playing for the Dragons. He'd of course bulked up and had quite a wiry frame, but that's kind of gone now because he has been so ill and he's had so many surgeries. I think there's a few kind of mitigating factors coming into it. I guess first and foremost is making sure that he's able to get past this condition, or is able to firstly live with it comfortably, and then kind of can he play professional sport at that high level? Is he able to kind of pack the kilos and the weight and muscle and all of those kinds of things on? I've kind of heard opinions for a few people that say that he's probably at long odds to kind of rejoin the Dragons, I think he'd probably be at long odds to play in 2024, although we haven't heard any specific updates lately. I know he's still in and around the club, and the boys really love having him around, and he obviously wants to get back out in the field, Cody, but I don't think the Dragons have forgotten about him, Sean. I think it's probably more so that they're planning around the future that they can control. They're unsure about Cody Ramsey, and even if he was able to return to training full time, say in November when preseason training starts, I dare say he would have to, having been out of the game for a whole year, he would probably have to spend at least the first half of the season playing reserve grade, and then if his form warranted, then kind of pushed up to the top level. So I think he's probably still a fair way away from kind of where the Dragons can kind of plan to having him as a part of that kind of top 17 in first grade. So hopefully that kind of gives you a bit more clarity on that one, Sean. Jonty's asked a pretty good question here, Kurt. He said, would Schuster be a good get for about 400 or 500k? Could Flano work his magic on him? What about Twal? He seems like a great middle buy for us. 600,000 ? Cheers, Jonty. Well, you're not going to like the fact that Dragons fans are sniffing around Alex Twal, because I know you, like many other Tigers fans, absolutely love him. I think he's a great middle forward, and if the Dragons get their hands on him, I'd love to have him. I think he's someone that really lays the platform in the middle of the park, has a quick play the ball, just a big body. I would definitely be keen on him. I wouldn't be keen on Schuster. I think that would be a recipe for disaster for the Dragons. I think we've had lazy players in the past. Our fitness has been poor. I've kind of seen aspects of Josh Schuster, which I'm not a big fan of. I think he's a bit of a lazy player. I think he's a little bit egocentric with the amount of money that he's on, and he wanted to be paid that kind of money as a 5'8". I don't think he's a half at all. He might have been a half in Matty's Cup and SG Ball, but when it comes to first grade, he just, as far as I'm concerned, he doesn't have the attitude to be a half. I think the edge back row position is his position, but I don't know what your thoughts are, Kurt, but I don't want anything to do with Josh Schuster. No doubt has a lot of talent, but he really reminds me of like a Aldi Brown Aldi brand Felipe Mateo, or I think it's just a recipe for disaster. Manly can deal with that, because I don't want the Dragons. I don't want them anywhere near that.
Yeah, look. At this point, and I don't know Josh Schuster from bar of soap, but I've heard stories through contacts I have through football, and he just doesn't have the commitment.
No.
And I don't know if it's people around him that are whispering in his ears. You mentioned Felipe Mateo. Josh Schuster makes Felipe Mateo look like Lance Armstrong. That's like, I remember watching a Schuster game against the Knights when Cherry was out, and the game was in the balance, and they had a chance to win the game. I don't remember what round it was, but it was earlier in the season when the Knights weren't doing well, and it might have been around Origin period. And Seabold said, "Yep, Schuster's our guy. He's going to lead us to victory. He's our playmaker." And in the last set of 6, and I might have even made a thread on Twitter about what Schuster did. He didn't even break into a gallop. He walked around the field. He's the most, I hate to say it, and he's the most overrated player in the competition for how much the media is building him up. The Dragons need to stay away with him. So far, it's not funny. There's an old saying, I wouldn't touch him with someone else's 10-foot pole. Alex Twal. It's a compliment. I feel great that Dragons fans are asking about Alex Twal. Someone said, was the question 12 for 600?
I think
Johnny said 600.
Yeah, around that 600,000 mark. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's more. I think you get him on 3 years at 500, and that's a great buy for the Dragons. Not only is he a good club man, he's quite respectful, respects the club he plays for. The players around him love him. He's a good trainer. And I'm not a fantasy meter guy or anything like that. I hate that stuff. I sign up every year with my mates in these fantasy group chats, and after 3 rounds, I just forget about it because I think it's stupid. But Twal is a goer. He runs good lines. He understands the lines. So a front row like Twal, when he comes on, he's got 3 or 4 lines he can run in that middle third. He always finds the right line, and he always finds his front, and he always plays a quick ball. That's why the West Tigers players love him. Alex Twal, $500K a year for 3 years, great buy. And he doesn't have to start. This is the thing, Jack. He's not a starting prop at the moment. He'll get better with age. But what he can do, and we said at the start of this year on the podcast, the most important thing for me was getting that depth in that Dragon 17, where I'm more worried and I'm more excited about the middles coming on after 20 minutes. That's what Alex Twal does, and you can get him at a good price. But Josh Schuster, Jesus, give me a break. No way.
No, I don't want to be touching anything like that. Hey, we've got a good question to finish here, Kurt. It's from Didge on Twitter, and he said, "Hey boys, has Flano's massive workload, Manly assistant coach, 2JB and Fox, set us back for next year? Only a few months till the start of pre-season for next year, and only one signing, Sele, while most clubs have been active in the player market signing most of the good players." Well, I'll just kind of jump in here, Kurt, before throwing to you. I wouldn't. Like, I don't think that's on Shane Flanagan. He is contracted with the Manly Sea Eagles until kind of October. He doesn't start with the Dragons until November. If anything, that's on the Dragons board. Like we've mentioned it plenty of times before. They had a chance to pull the rug from underneath Anthony Griffin in earlier than they did. They could have done it in pre-season. They could have done it at the end of last year. They could have done it halfway through last year. And Shane Flanagan then could have been building this roster. So I don't think it necessarily has to do with his workload. I think it's the fact that Flanagan can't Like he can work a little bit with the Dragons football department, and we've seen the fact we've signed Jaime Sele, but he's also got a job to do with the Manly side, and I think he's probably going to be sticking to that. He can't exactly be going and signing a lot of players, but I think the other side of that, Kurt, as well, is probably the fact that there just isn't a lot of quality out there. Like Jaime Sele was one of the few kind of quality players the Dragons have been able to sign. The talk on Luke Thompson's gone a bit cold. The talk on IPAP's been a bit cold. So I just don't think there's a lot of quality options out there, rather than it being the fact that Shane Flanagan is working an awful lot.
I just had an epiphany just then too. I just thought of a third Italian from the Steelers that played for Parramatta.
Good to see you're focusing on the task at hand here, Kurt.
I'm doing but I promise, Gouts on, I did not Google. Look, to get back to your question, I've said this before. There's a lot going on away from the public we don't know about. And I'm not talking about Flanagan per se directly dealing with players. I don't think the fact that Flanagan isn't in a Dragons polo shirt right now makes any difference to recruitment or attracting players, because the players, I think now players want to go to the Dragons because there's a goal. They've got a coach. Before it was like, I agree. It doesn't look too good. What you'll find is there's a lot of done deals ready to go. Lots of player movement for next year already done that we won't hear about until next month or after the grand final.
That's right.
Fortunately, that's just how it is in rugby league. But I guarantee you, Jack, and Dragons fans, there's 3, 4, 5 Dragons contracts already signed for next year, new players that you won't hear about until after the season. That's just how it is. So, look, that kind of kills the podcast a little bit in some ways, and day-to-day, social media, but that's just the way it is. And it's always been like an underhanded agreement that, we won't announce it yet because this player might still be in finals contention or whatever, but I guarantee there's players already signed for Dragons next year. But yes, I understand Dragons fans are baying for contracts and to see change, but it's just not the way it is, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's going to be a slow build for the Dragons, and let's not forget that there will be some really good quality young players that will come through. That's what happened at Cronulla. He changed the pathways there. He'll do the same at the Dragons. So it's not necessarily like in the English Premier League in soccer where you're gonna see a team go out and sign 6 or 8 or 10 players. I don't think it's going to be managed like that. I think he's going to try and get some key pieces through kind of the free agency and in the market. But I think they're going to be able to produce some pretty good first graders, I reckon, from some of these young kids coming through that Dragon system down on the south coast over the next kind of 3 to 5 years and maybe later into the decade as well. So don't worry too much, Dragons fans. I think there is some excitement on the horizon with Shane Flanagan coming to the club. That wraps up our Fan Corner segment for this week. If you want to get your questions featured, you can email them to us, redvpodcast@gmail.com. You can also throw them below our graphic on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram that we have each week. The Red V Podcast is the way that you can follow us there. Before we do finish off the podcast episode, we need to reveal the Who Am I for this week. We mentioned a couple of clues earlier on the podcast that this particular player was born on the 20th of April 1972 in Wollongong, played for 2 clubs, for Illawarra and Parramatta, and I'll give you a bit more detail about that. He made his debut in 1990, played between 1990 and 1996 with Illawarra, 90 games and 18 tries, and then spent 2 seasons at the Eels in 1997 and 1998, making 13 appearances with 1 try. Represented Italy in 1 game and also coached them in 3 games between 2003 and 2006. And the final clue I will give you, because I'm pretty sure Curtis Woodward and everyone else has got it at the moment, is that this particular player was a fullback and now works in the player management arena. He's quite one of the more famous or well-known player managers in rugby league land in the current day. Kurt, I'll throw it over to you, mate, because I'm pretty sure I know that you're really gonna nail this one. Who's the Who Am I for this week?
You threw me off because in my memory, I thought he played a few more games for the Eels, but obviously not. But David Riolo.
Yep, you're spot on, Kurt. Yeah. One of the just on his wiki page, and he cut his teeth working with some of the clients he had: Jason Kalis, Craig Fitzgibbon, Andrew Ryan, and Mick Vella, and then he had like Todd Carney, Paul Gallen, James Graham, Brett and Josh Morris, Kieran Jack across in the AFL, Carmichael Hunt. A great player manager and still doing a great job for his clients nowadays. But yeah, we salute him and remember his career with the Steelers, part of those early to mid 90s Steelers sides that had a bit of success. And he was the man in the number one jumper that was making it all happen, Kurt.
Yeah, he was a very underrated player as well. But yeah, part of that Steelers team, like the smaller fullback, good player. I'm just shocked. When I've got Skiffaletti and Piccinelli, I can't believe I forgot Riolo. But there you go.
That's all right. That's the Who Am I for this week. Kurt, a big thanks for your work over the last 90 minutes or so, mate. Always great chatting Dragons footy, and we'll do it at the same time next week, brother.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it.
Thanks to all of the fans that have tuned in as well. Always great bringing you Dragons news, even if it's sometimes a little bit depressing. Surely there is some joy around the corner for us. We'll be back next Tuesday night for a brand new episode of the Red V podcast. Fingers, toes, and everything else crossed for a win over the New Zealand Warriors over there in Auckland. But on behalf of Kurt Woodward, I've been Jack Clifton. We'll see you next week. Let's go those mighty Dragons.
Sports Social Podcast Network.